Hello, everyone. I am Jeff Sheets, Director of Education here at TrueFire. Welcome to another amazing episode of TrueFire Live. Great to have everyone here. We've got a really cool show tonight. If you want, go ahead and drop in where you're watching from in the chat. It's great to see everybody here. Looks like we've got a lot of folks already from Portugal, from Boston. 100 degrees in Boston. I know that feeling. I think that's what everybody is dealing with. It's hot out there. So it's great to be in here for a little cool jazz. Maybe it's hot jazz. I'm not sure. It works either way, I think. But we've got a great show tonight. If you've got questions for Mimi, please drop them in the comments and we will get to as many of them as possible. So the subject is jazz harmony deep dive. That is a huge subject. But Mimi's got some really cool things laid out. I'm going to step you through some of the ways that she thinks about it and try to answer some questions along the way. Of course, Mimi Fox is a long time, very long time TrueFire educator, one of our favorite educators, one of our favorite humans. And so without further ado, we're going to bring Mimi on. Hey, Mimi, how are you doing tonight?
Hey, great to be here, Jeff. Thanks for that nice intro.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So we're going to talk about some cool stuff tonight. We're going to be doing some deep dive into jazz harmony. So maybe tell us a little bit about kind of how you're going to approach that. And then if you would, maybe play us something and kick things off.
Yeah, sounds great, Jeff. Yeah, I think, I was thinking when we first talked about doing a deep dive into jazz harmony, one of the things a lot of students ask me about is chordal soloing and how to take like really cool chord voicings and voice lead with them and make them into a really compelling statement, just like you would with single lines. And so I thought I would use that as a springboard. And then, of course, we can get into anything people want to get into, time permitting. So yeah, I'm going to show people how to voice lead. I have a few different things, but I'm always happy to break out of my set spiel too and do something different. So we'll just see what happens.
Sounds great. Well, let's start off with a little bit of playing.
Yeah, I thought I'd play. This is a tune I recorded I was fortunate to do 4 different recordings with Steve Vai's Favored Nations label in the early 2000s. And this is an original piece of mine called Buddy's Blues, because as we say, you can't go wrong with the blues. So let's see what we got. All right. Buddy's Blues. Buddy's Blues. I surprised myself a few times. But I did, it's interesting. I wanted to talk with everybody about voice leading. So, because I did that at one point during my solo where I was doing, playing melodies with my chords to create basically a chord solo. So, it's one of the things that I like to talk about. I mean, I learned a lot of this just from listening to the great Wes Montgomery, but I did develop what I feel like has helped a lot of students. And I want to show you guys this. Let's say we got our G7. Okay. Now there are different scales that you can play with it. For now, let's use the G Mixolydian scale. So that's just going to give us just a major with a flat 7. Okay, so from that scale, what if I put a different G7 chord to each of those notes and moved up the neck? So in this case, I'm just going to use the 2 high strings, the B and the E string. Okay, so check this out. Let me play the scale just on the B string. Here are the notes. It's basically, by the way, G Mixolydian is the same as C major. So check it out, same notes. All right, let's see what I get. So for this open G7, that's one of the first G7 chords I learned. Seriously, you don't have to necessarily do that. Now I got the high F right there. But anyway, okay, now I've got the C. It's like a sus with like an 11. Then I've got this, right? I'm just moving up. 13. You can use your bar chord or switch to one of these chords to the F. To the G. Instead of being G7, I could make it a sus. I could do all kinds of different things with it. Then I got the G9 bar chord. So let me just go over that. This gives me this. And now do it on the high string. Check this out, guys. So now I'm going to get this. So again, if I have it, I could open it up. So like G6, G13. Okay, I can do this. That again takes me back to my baby G7 I learned when I was 10. There we go. really get that chord out. I can make it a flat 9. The type of chord that I play, I could change it based on the harmony that I want. But so if you just do that, what I just did, take the scale and put a chord to it as you're moving up, you'd get something like this. Again, I was Buddy's Blues that I was playing. It's just a blues in G. So check it out. So you see, there are inner melodies being played. I'm not just, randomly playing different chords. So, hopefully that gives you folks some idea of how to take it and put it into a whole song. And then, of course, your next step, once you've harmonized the scale, of course, there are other scales you could use, and we can talk about that in a minute. But the next thing would be to play cool rhythms. And that is really something for me. In my different TrueFire courses, I talk about this, that I try to think like a drummer when I'm comping and I'm playing chord solos, so that I'm not just going to go. There I'm also doing some voice leading, but I'm playing the same rhythm the whole time. That was just, 4 to the bar. But now what if I did something like this? I'm going to drop my pick for a second. I get sick of it. I have a love-hate relationship with my pick. Okay, so check this out. Now I'm going to play different rhythms. So you see, that's now I'm sounding like a drummer. Do you hear that last thing? And the drummers have teased me about the sound effects that I use for the different drums, but I think you guys get the point. So maybe do we have any questions, or should Jeff, do we have any questions yet? I can keep going, but I also want to, I don't want to get too far before people are like, what the heck is she talking about?
No, absolutely. If anyone has any questions on this stuff, chime in. I think you're doing a great job of taking them down this path as of right now. So you can kind of continue on, but if anybody's got questions as we're going, we can circle back and get to some of those questions about, if you want a little bit more specifics about what's happening.
Yeah. And also if people have other things that it doesn't have to be on this topic, just every now and then someone will ask me, who is my favorite monkey? And I don't really need to address that anymore because I've talked about it so much. And spoiler alert, it was Mike Nesmith. So anyway, that's for the older folks out there. But anyway, yeah, guys, shoot me.
So here we have a couple questions. How long have you hated your pick?
I don't hate it all the time. It's just sometimes I like to give my hand a break. It's good when you've been playing. As I mentioned, guys, I started playing when I was 10. So that's a lot of miles. And so sometimes it's just nice, like late at night, I would often drop my pick and just play finger style. So that's a nice thing to do sometimes, but it's also good for your hand. I've had a lot of, overuse injuries from all my years and gazillion hours of playing and practicing. So I like to break it up some. So I don't really hate my pick.
So we've got another question here, which I think is a really good one since we're sort of on this, which is, could you define voice leading? Maybe, break that down and start from the bare bones for folks that maybe aren't as, into it.
Yeah, sure. That's a great question. Voice leading. Let's take it really, really, really back to basics. And I'm going to go back, and people are going to laugh. Not everybody's a jazzer. So I don't actually use that term, but people refer to me as that usually from another genre, dear friends of mine. But check it out. If we got a G7 bar chord and we're going to a C7, listen to what's happening here. So the F, my F in the G7 chord is moving to the E of the C7 chord. That's a voice that's moving. Now, of course, multiple voices can move at one time, where you've got something. I did this when I was playing the blues. You know, playing sixths or thirds, you know, depending how you look at it. There's several voices moving. And when I do a chordal, let's take a common jazz progression, 2-5-1. So let's say I have D minor 7 to G7 to C major 7. Okay, so, but I'm going to play some nice voicing. So here, how about I do something like this? So there I have several voices moving. I've got but I've also got the bass notes moving. That's the I could have done the roots. That doesn't sound as interesting to me as having the fifth below each chord. So now we actually have this. So there are several voices moving at the same time. And there are many variations on this. You know, I think I did this over the A minor. I used what we call the stretchy chord, something like this. So there was a voice moving down. I kept the A minor chord on top. So there's all kinds of different ways that you can voice lead, but essentially when we're looking at it in terms of harmony for, you know, chordal solos and building nice chord voicings, how they move, that's what we're interested in, the different voices moving. And again, it can just be one thing, or it can be several different notes moving at the same time. Let me see. I can see some of these questions too, Jeff. I always like seeing you when you pop up in next to me, but
yeah, you can dig into questions if you want, or I can sort of give them to you, because I think, you know, you're rolling so well with showing everything. Let's do this. How do you approach playing in a trio? I know that's a big question, but you know, for folks that are trying to play with a trio, how do you get that to where you can do chords, soloing, do sort of everything?
Yeah, that's a great question. Yeah. So I'm assuming that the trio would be guitar, bass, and drums. It would change drastically if it was like guitar, bass, and piano, you know, like the old Nat King Cole trio with Oscar Moore. That would be a very different kind of thing, because if you had piano and guitar, you've got a lot of different possibilities. You've got two instruments with, you know, complete, you know, harmonic universe. So basically orchestras at their disposal. But let's say we've got guitar, bass, drums. So basically, you know, as opposed to playing solo or when there's no piano, I can really fill out a sound a lot. Like, you know, again, let's come back to the blues. So I put in chords. So even if I had a bass player, so I got a bass player walking lines, but I can put chords in the middle of my phrases. So I'm going to mix and match. I'm going to play some single lines, then put chords in, similar to what I was doing playing solo, but because I've got a bass player and drummer playing with me, I can leave more space for them. What a concept. Always good when guitarists leave more space for their fellow musicians. But, you know, it's also, they're going to impact me. What a bass player is playing behind me is going to impact me. If we're playing a blues and suddenly the bass player and then the drummer go into a double time feel behind me, I may then double time my lines, or I may not. I might just stay where I am and let them do their thing. But you know, in a real live situation, regardless of genre, where musicians are improvising, whether it's jazz, rock, blues, any style, there's an interaction. When I'm playing solo guitar, I'm telling a story, but the story is my own story by myself. But when I'm playing with a great trio, then we've got the three of us creating a narrative, creating a story together. And so that's very different. That's a very different thing. I want to answer this one question. It looks like Jake's Song Musings, I'm guessing Jacob. How did Wes influence my playing? And who else guitar-wise? Oh God, there's so many awesome players, but I can't even say it. For Wes, it's more like, how didn't he influence my playing? First of all, Wes was very famous for his great octave work. So early on, when I started listening to his recordings, I was like, gosh, how can I get my octave work better? So for guys and gals that are wanting to do that better, start with a simple pentatonic scale. And then eventually you can make whole lines, and that's what I would work on. So there's octaves. In fact, I wrote one song, which is I actually go into a deep exploration of it in one of my TrueFire courses, Jazz Performance, an original of mine called Pack of Lies. And it's got an intro, but the bulk of the head is played in octaves like this. And that repeats, and then the bridge. So I don't know, as a composer, if I would have written that piece had I not been so deeply into Wes at the time, And then, as far as, other guitar influence, I mean, actually, when I got into jazz, other than Wes, one player that I loved was Bruce Forman, who became a friend and mentor to me early on. And of course, I really loved, I guess, probably Grant Green, completely different than Wes, but really dug some of the stuff that he did. And then, of course, for solo guitar, Joe Pass and Lenny Brow. So those are some of the people. But I also got into a lot of non-guitarists, those unfortunates, Coltrane, Charlie Parker, Dexter Gordon, Sonny Rollins. I mean, and I would say as a jazz musician, I've just been as much influenced by, some of those players, and also great drummers have influenced me a lot. Like my early influences, like Art Blakey and Elvin Jones and Max Roach. So let's see. I'm trying to see some of the other questions. I know what you folks are going to do, because I've done this kind of masterclass before. You're going to wait till we've got 5 minutes, and then I'm going to get 80 questions. So come on, bring it on, guys.
That is true. That's how it works. But in between times, if anyone has not checked out all of your courses at TrueFire, I think you've got almost a dozen courses at TrueFire on
13.
Various subjects.
I think they're 13. I just hit the baker's dozen.
Oh, nice. So you have a lot of courses at TrueFire with really, really amazing stuff in them. So please go check that out. The link is in right below the YouTube video to go check out all of Mimi's courses. And Mimi plays live. You've got a live gig, I believe, coming up with Stanley Jordan as well, right?
Yeah, thanks so much. Thanks so much for mentioning that. Yeah, actually this Friday,
nice.
In Minneapolis at a great jazz club called the Dakota. And Stanley and I have played together, I don't know, dozens of times over the years, but to have, we really love doing a whole show together. We do a lot of duo stuff, and then we break off and do solo stuff. And it's very, very extemporaneous. It's always a lot of fun playing with Stanley, and he's a great guy too. So I'm really looking forward to that. So that's June 27th. Actually, coming up this coming Friday, June 27th at the Dakota in Minneapolis. So get your tickets. I think they're almost sold out, but.
Oh, that's awesome. Very, very cool. Yeah. I mean, you've played with so many people and toured all over. It's always fun to hear all the things that you're doing. So let's do it. The question is, do you use a lot of shell voicings? Is that the way, do you think about it that way? How do you think of that? That's the question.
You know, I am more of an organic, intuitive player. So I don't know that I think of it in exactly those terms. I mean, I think for me, I just use whatever I want to use to get the job done, as it were. So, you know, when I'm playing solo, I'm looking at different things. I'm seeing some of these other questions coming in. I would say no about the shell voices. I said I just play what I feel like at a given moment in time, and so it could be a shell voicing coming out, sneaking in. Who knows? I know that maybe that sounds a little mystical, but I don't really think of it that way. And a lot of times when I'm playing, I'm not thinking on a conscious level. The stuff is intuitive. It becomes more intuitive because I'm trying to follow each phrase and go with the music. So hopefully that makes sense. Let's see. Someone says, Ms. Fox, if, for example, you were playing Crazy, the Patsy Cline in D, and had to go a full tone up to E, you go to the 5 of E as B7 to make the change to E, or what other options would you recommend? Okay, so if you're in the key of D and you want to go into the key of E, or you want to go anywhere, there are many different things. Of course, you could use the 5 chord, and you could use a 2-5. You could also use a tritone 2-5. So let's say you're in the key of E, right? And so you've got this. So the 2-5 in E would be this. Right? So, but so if you're in D, you could move that whole thing up. So if you had D, and you could easily just move up to, that would certainly be a way. You could also use the tritone. So if you're on D, you could also just slide up there. I mean, you know, there are so many ways. There are more ways that you can think of, but, you know, well, I was talking about the tritone. So you can use the tritone of B7, which is F. And sometimes I put the 2 chord before the tritone. So if you have D, now I want to go to E. Yeah, that was kind of a wild leap there, but there's so many things, so many different things that you can do. So I think you have to use your ear, and sometimes I just do different kind of voice leadings. I think of the chord that I've ended on. So again, Larry, coming back to your question, where you had it, you're in D. Instead of doing a 2-5, maybe I'll do something like this. I'll move through different major key centers. It'll take a little easier chord. I made it hard for everybody. Now maybe take it up to E. That was just made up off the top of my head, but it was just trying to do a cycle. I just made up a cycle of different chord voices. I can do it down here as a D major 9. I'll do it here. hopefully that answered your question. Those are some different ideas. Any tips on getting your fingers to spread that far and get clean tones? Yeah, practice. Let me talk about these stretchy chords, what you should do, because you don't want to hurt your hand. I've seen people, do things where they're reaching like this and trying to throw their bicep into the chord. That's not good. You'll notice you want to keep a good posture. But so if this was too hard for you to do this stretchy chord in D, move it up to G, move it all the way up your neck. By the way, the observant student would notice that in both cases, I kept a D pedal. It's the root of D, it's the 5 of G. You can even take it up to A. So try it in frets where you don't have to do this, but definitely don't do this. Don't lean into it. Try to have all the strength come from your hand, from your fingers. See how relaxed? I'm very relaxed. My arm is relaxed. My hand is relaxed. And I'm sort of, pivoting my thumb. My thumb is acting as a pivot to keep my hand nice and steady. So that's the tip for playing these. Nice wide fretboard. Actually, it's pretty skinny. I think it's just how it looks. It's the way that it's looking on the video. So
that's awesome. It's a beautiful guitar either way, wide or skinny. So I've got a great question here for you, Mimi. Let's go back to the blues that you were doing, that we started with, right? And if someone wanted to start getting that, sort of under their fingers, some of those interesting concepts, how would you sort of suggest they lay out practicing those? What would be the first steps to say, hey, I'm on the 1 chord, I'm going to go to the 4 chord? Where would they start with that? Give us maybe a couple of practical things that they could work on.
Sure. Great question, Jeff. Thank you. I would say first, don't even think about the 4 chord. We have just the 1 chord. Like I'm pretending I'm stuck in, a bar somewhere and I'm 18 and the singer just can't stop. So we never go to the 4 chord. We're just staying on the 1, and maybe the singer's getting the audience into it and my hands are dying and I'm still on the 1 chord. So I'm not even going to think about that. So just try to take, like if you're on this G7, think of how many different G7s you could play and listen to the melody notes you're playing with them. So just stay on the 1. Check it out. Here's a G7 bar chord. So let's just work with the melody here. Put a chord to each of these. So I have G7, G13, G7 sharp 5, G7, G7 flat 5. So, and then I can do that on a high string. Maybe if I play a G7 here, maybe I do this. Sharp 9, natural 9, flat 9, and back to G7. So you want to, I like to work to get students started on the top 2 strings. Of course, you can voice lead, and we do with other strings, but start with these because they're easy to see, and you're going to be seeing the melody on top. Then you could take the same ideas, and then you bring in the 4 chord. So then I finally the singer said I could go to the 4 chord. Praise Jesus. I finally made the 4 chord. Okay, so now I'm going to do the same thing. And on the high string. Right? And so now you want to then go on to some different positions. Like, for example, if you have a G7 here, okay? So I've got a G7. Here's my basic G7. Now I'm going to go up. I'm going to do something a little different with the voice leading. So I've got G, A flat, A, B flat, or A sharp, B, and let me put a chord to each one. All right, so I've got G7, basically A flat diminish, the G7 with a flat 9, G9, G7 sharp 9, and then this bar chord hitting it on top. And now how about I do it from here? How about I take this B? I'm going to go from this B to this F. Check it out. So now I've got something like this. I changed the chord type just based on what I felt like playing. I had G7, sus. This is a 9 with a sharp 5. That's the only note I care about. Remember, we're doing this. Right? So I had this. I just put the 9 in because I liked it. I didn't have to. I could have done this. But I like it with the 9 in there. Then G9. 9 with a sharp 5. I could have done this. I just like this voicing better. And then 13. And then I came all the way up to this F, and that's just a G7. Okay? So that's the kind of thing that you want to do. And, you know, as you're moving with these different positions, you get comfortable. You want to do that everywhere you see your G7 chord. And then, of course, everything you've done in G7, that's one of the virtues of the guitar, is now we can now move to the 4 chord, and we've got the same shapes. They're in a different fret. So as I was showing you, so we had up to C, same thing. Or we can do the C here. So if you've done this, you want to stay in position to get some voice leading ideas. How about here? Now, we may not want to do that. That wasn't musical in the context of the two things. But the point is you have all your possibilities. And then when you're playing a blues, you decide which voicings you want to do. So. So after a while, you'll be able to do this at any tempo, and you just get real comfortable. It's so much fun. Hopefully this is making sense to people as we go. Which of your courses would be best for a beginner? Can you give the order for the, okay, I'm going to let Trufire handle the back end. I really recommend 2 courses that I did early on for a jazz beginner. One would be my first course that I did, which Jeff and I were talking about when we were backstage, as it were, earlier, would be Jazz Anatomy, because that goes through a lot of really cool concepts and through some really important basics. And then I would recommend Graduated Soloing, because that's got graduated solos, because that just takes, basically, I take, 5 different songs and show you how to take it from a basic level, then to take it a more intermediate, and then finally where I'm playing freely. And that's a more advanced level. But I think, I've used that, the Graduated Solos material, for many years with my classes. It's also, some of it is in my Mel Bay book, which I use also. So they're both really good tools for, sort of getting your feet wet and starting to solo in a jazz, with a jazz feel, and to develop some of the jazz vocabulary.
Absolutely. I mean, I think the cool thing about Mimi's catalog at TrueFire is it covers a lot of different things. You've got the jazz song practice playbook. The solo acoustic jazz playbook is really awesome. But I really like the essentials, the jazz improvisation essentials, which is just really performance studies, so things to actually play. And then Mimi breaks it down and shows you things. So even if you don't do the entire solo, you can learn a lot from all the sort of analysis that she does of that, and shows you the little tricks along the way. So it's a pretty good range of stuff. I think there's a lot of options. It just depends upon what level you're at and what you've already done, where you're sort of coming in. I think that's something that you have to sort of assess and kind of figure out. That brings me back to, that was awesome what you just showed with the chords. So how would you approach the idea of putting the single note lines in there? So you're doing those chords, you've sort of got the voice leading going, but as you did before and talked about sort of being able to play in a trio setting, you're adding some lines in there. Are you thinking those lines are coming from a scale, chord tones, more arpeggios? How are you thinking about that?
Yeah, that's a great question, Jeff. Thank you. Yeah, I mean, I think what's the best way to answer this? I think for me, really, I don't separate out because I'm just sort of using my ear. And so I'm I'm following the music as I'm playing and trying to, and again, as I mentioned, interacting with a bass player and a drummer in a trio situation. But yeah, generally, the chords and the scales inform each other. The chords and the arpeggios, the chords and the single line things that I'm playing inform each other. So for example, so there I'm in this one area of the neck, but I'm hearing that G9. Where if I played this, so I played a 9 with the flat 5, might change my line. Or down here. So yeah, so definitely the chords and the lines inform each other. Or if I play a line, say I'm playing a 2-5-1. Let's come back here, a 2-5-1. Let's see. See there, I let the line, the end of that line, I hit the A, which is the 13 of a C. And so I let that lead me into the chord choice. So that they really work hand in glove, pun intended. Guitars are hands, not in gloves in this case, but the single lines will inform the chords and vice versa. So let me see. Can you spell the notes when you which of your okay? Let's see. Can you spell the notes when you name a chord? Can I or would I? I'm not sure what you mean by that. This is Larry. Yeah, sure. Like here I had C, B, E, A. Notice I don't have to look at my guitar to figure it out. I can hear it. If I bring it down to G, I'm going to have G, F sharp, B, E. It's a major 13. So I always know what I'm doing at any point in time. I can hear it, even if I'm playing with my eyes closed. I always know where I am and can hear things. So that's a really good thing that you want to be working on. Okay. Let's see. Jeff?
Right. Yeah, absolutely. I've got a question here for you that you've covered in some of your courses. You talk about arpeggios. Obviously, you are a master at playing all kinds of different arpeggios. But someone who maybe isn't a master, where would you have them start out with sort of working those up and practicing, shapes in a sense, but then just understanding how that goes together? What would you say would be the best sort of practice situation for working on arpeggios?
Yeah, I actually happen to have a whole Trufire course on that, Jeff, with jazz modes and arpeggios that really goes into this in depth. But yeah, again, I'm going to come back to the blues. So I would say for someone new working on this, Let's say you have a blues in G again. So you would start, there's different ways that you could do it. You could learn your G7 arpeggio in each shape. Wherever you've got your chord. So those are all the little grips that you have. And then, I like to say to people, don't just practice it. Same thing with your scales. You don't want to sound robotic. You want the arpeggio to come to life. So work with a backing track, and Trufire is great at that because we got so many courses with great rhythm sections and great backing tracks. So anyway, tape yourself playing a G7. Just a blues line. And just stay on that blues, stay on that, tape yourself just over that one chord and then dig into the arpeggio. Once you have it under your fingers, you can play it this way too. Make it musical. See what I mean? And you can do that in any of your shapes. So you want to take this and make it as musical as you can. Then we're in a blues, we go to our 4 chord. It's going to be the same thing. And wherever you are, you see your chord underneath the arpeggio. You always want to have that chord there. That is just like anchoring you in the sound of what the arpeggio is going to sound like. So we have a C7 here. So you want to work with that arpeggio too. And then, so again, you can do it 2 ways. You can learn all your G7 arpeggios, or you could stay in one area and go practice G to C, 1 to the 4 chord, make it musical. C. And that's just really simple. That's just using the notes. I see a comment.
Absolutely. I've got a follow-up, and I just wanted to actually just mention something, because talking about the jams. Yeah, I mean, Trufire has a lot of great jam packs, jazz jam packs that people can pick up. They've, of course, they can get the multi-track jams, which is really cool because then you can control the mix, which is also the cool thing about the in the jam. And you did an in the jam, same thing, right? Where you can literally, students can, pull the lead out, solo the lead guitar, pull the rhythm, just play with the rhythm. I mean, it's an amazing technology. So if you haven't checked out Mimi's In the Jam, do so. Go to the page there and check it out, because it's pretty awesome. I mean, that's something that is super helpful for students that are trying to, get a feel for things. They can listen to what you're playing, but then, try it themselves as well, which I think is super important, right? I'm sure you played with a million jam tracks and, played over things to get you're such an improv master. That takes doing that, right? It takes jumping in and playing over backing tracks.
Well, actually, Jeff, this dates me, but I didn't have jam tracks when I was first learning this stuff. I had a cassette player, and I would take a 60-minute cassette. This is no lie, guys. And I would tape myself playing one chord for 60 minutes so that I could work on all these different ideas and stuff that I was doing. So, so much for jam. But that's one of the great things about having, Trufire.
That's awesome. Yeah. For sure. We can make it easier than having to record a 60-minute one chord. We can help you with that.
Exactly.
So I have a question there. Someone says they've got the real book, but they're not really sure what to do with it. What would you recommend for, sort of a jazz newbie to start working with that book? What would be, you know, how do they jump into that?
You know, you want to take songs that are really, if you're a jazz newbie and you picked up a real book or any of the different books that fake books, collections of songs that are a mixture of modern jazz and what we call the Great American Songbook. You want to pick songs that are really pretty easy, that don't have too many changes and that the melody lays really easily, like stuff like Blue Bossa or Autumn, excuse me, Autumn Leaves or All of Me, and some blues like Thelonious Monk's Blue Monk, which has a fun melody, but it's just a blues, or Freddie Freeloader. Any of these basic, Sugar by Stanley Turrentine, is a great, pretty simple piece. So you want to work with, some of those kind of songs that you can, some people have favorites that they love, but if you're new to jazz, do not pick something like Body and Soul, because it's tricky. It's in a tricky key. And even if you transpose it, it's got a lot of changes. So that's what I would say to that. And we've got a good question here from Robert Bainbridge. When improvising, how do you balance playing within the established harmonic framework of a tune while still exploring the more outside or unexpected sounds? Robert, that is a wonderful question. And the answer to that is that it's very much dealer's choice, as if one were playing gin, or perhaps Finbar, or perhaps even Rummikub. So there are many different ways that you can go. And this is very subjective. For example, if I'm playing a blues, and depending on what the other musicians are doing, I may stay in simple blues lines. But if the bass player starts going out, even if we're playing a blues, I may mix in some more dissonant stuff. Say the bass player's hammering on. I might play. So there, but I always like to, it's my personal musical aesthetic, if you will, that I like to, if I've done, for a period of time, played some very out or dissonant stuff, I like to come back to stuff that's more consonant, probably blues based, because to me, that's the balance that I like. So great question, Mr. Bainbridge. Definitely. So I'm going to mix and match based on my ears and the level of tension that I want to create at a given moment in time. But it's not separate from what my fellow musicians are doing. Like I said, if the bass player starts playing some really dissonant stuff, it would sound a little odd for me to just be still playing blues lines. So, we have to listen to each other. Again, there's a conversation that's happening now between me and the other musicians that I'm playing with. But even if I'm playing solo guitar, I don't like to stay out for too long before I come back in. Again, totally subjective. This is my own personal preference, but great question.
Yeah, that is a good question. And I think, Elizabeth had a similar question, which was, how do you, decide when to use those discordant elements, create tension? But I think the other thing is, how do you resolve? What's the best way? Obviously just going to, to home base, but what are some nice ways to get back into the groove, into something a little bit more home based after you've been out there?
Yeah, that's a great question too. Again, it depends on the song or what you were doing. But let's come back to the blues. I'm going to switch keys here just for a second. I'm going to move up to B flat just because I'm sick of the sound of G now. All right. So let's say I've been playing for a while, and let me play for a little bit, and it's been out for a while. Then listen to me gradually bring it back in. First, let's see. There I came back, and that was really almost a bailout, but I came back, and when I came to the 4 chord, to the E flat, I did the 3rd and the flat 7, 2 identifying chord tones that took me back inside. So, you know, when I'm playing solo guitar, sometimes I will play a very long rubato phrase and then come back, as Jeff mentioned, to home base, which is taking me back to the chord. So if I have a 2-5-1, I'm playing a song. So then I came back into a very pretty C major 7 and resolved it out, even though I had gone way out. So, you know, again, consonance, dissonance, inside out, yin yang, it's all about telling a good story. And, you know, there are times where if I'm doing a recording session and with someone else, it's their session, I'm really listening all the time to what will make things the most musical with the fellow musicians that I'm playing with. So I don't want to go out again. If I was playing a blues thing or a beautiful ballad with, say, a saxophone or a flute or a vocalist, that's going to change how I play. You know, that's going to, and it should, because I want to, you know, I want to honor the musicians I'm playing with and create the best musical experience for everybody. So. Somebody wrote in, I've been working on Body and Soul. Good for you. Great song. Great song.
That is awesome. Well, really good stuff. I mean, we've done a deep dive, and I know the deep dive into jazz harmony sometimes is a little bit of, you know, reinforcing what those concepts are that we're diving deep into, right?
Right.
And a couple of things we've talked about is like chord substitutions. So things like that. I mean, give us a little bit of the same understanding of you know, the basics of that, just to sort of wrap up kind of where we're coming from on adding these other chords. When you're adding these different things, how do you know which ones you're adding? How can you know, where would somebody start with that? Where would be a good place for them to sort of get their fingers around that idea?
Yeah, great question, Jeff. Thank you. Yeah, I think that, you know, basically in any musical situation, you want to first work on just really exploring a chordal voicing and how you can really color that chord. For example, let's say we're here on this D minor. Now, I might decide to play a minor 9. I might do one of what I call these stretchy chords, this one that people were saying, oh my God, how, or I might play it here. So this is just some different D minors. Maybe I'll play a minor 6. Maybe I'll play a minor 11. I've got this. There, I did something interesting. I had the G on top and I put the F, which is the flat 3rd. I put it on the bottom. So here was the chord, D minor, and put the 11 on top. But I wanted to get the F back in there, so I put that in. That was just kind of strange. I just did this right now. But anyway, so then in terms of voice leading, let's say I decide I like this D minor 9. You can't go wrong with it. Now, as I played earlier, I'm going to go into a G7. So I could do this, or for the G7, but I could also do a D flat. I could use the tritone chord. So now listen to how these 3 chords move. And again, we have the 2 moving voices that I showed earlier. I can do it with these stretchy chords. I can do it up here. So I would say take all of your chords, take a 2-5-1. Start in the key of C or the key of G, pick an easy key to do it, and work on picking voicings that you really like that sound really pretty. And, you know, remember that you're creating melodies. So if I'm here, so I'm just using my ear and I'm trying to think, how can I color that melody? That was still a little bit different. So there I was using some of the same ideas, but putting it into a whole thing. And then I added the 6th chord. I just did a 2-5-1-6 in the key of C, and then played some different voicing, sometimes adding the bass notes and fleshing out the sound, because there isn't a bass player or drummer with me. I'm just playing solo right now. So that's how I would approach it. I would say, take your chords and think of how many beautiful voicings you could do with them. So, I come back to my first D minor when I was a kid was this, and D minor 7 was this, Alfred's Book 1. Now we have all the Trufire courses. We've rendered Alfred obsolete. So I got a D minor 7, I've got a D minor 7, I have a D minor 7, I have a D minor 7, I have a D minor 7, right? And now I'm going to play 9s if I want to with these different voicings. Or maybe I'll play an 11, a 9 and 11. Something here. Quite beautiful. So you want to, work with just one chord at a time. See how many D minors you can find on the neck of the guitar, how many G7s and how many Cs, etc. And then you start putting it together, staying in one area of the neck and creating that. And that, comes back full circle to what we were talking about earlier, which is voice leading. It's all connected.
That's great. Great advice. Amazing as always, Mimi. I know we're running out of time. We could just sit here and listen to you talk all night and play, because you've got so much knowledge to share, and we appreciate that. But if anybody wants to check out your courses, please go do so. There's just a lot of great information in these courses that she's done for TrueFire, and there are so many of them covering different things, everything from rhythm and lead to arpeggios, and pretty much everything anyone needs is covered there. So go check that out. But thank you so much, Mimi, for being here with us and sharing your time. As always, we appreciate it. And maybe we can have you maybe play us out, right? Do a little play in here as we.
That's what it's all about. That's what it's all about, Jeff. And thank you for being here. Great to see you again, Jeff. And thank you for hosting the event, as it were. You're definitely the host with the most.
Thank you.
Right, I might just play some I don't know what I'm gonna play. We'll see.